The Incredibles would look like in live action. First up, Mr. Incredible, aka Bob. One Redditor suggested Brendan Fraser in their pretty spot-on casting thread. Fraser is, among other things, both an Oscar winner and the quintessential George of the Jungle, so he gets bonus points right from the jump. In that same thread, another Redditor offered up Kevin James as a possibility. As they note, he's a bit short for the role, but hey, that's what Apple boxes are for. For our third option, we really need a strong chin, so I'm going to put forward Bruce Campbell for the role. The Evil Dead star has never really gotten the big-budget lead role that he deserves, so now might be the time. While that one looks pretty solid, I'm going to go with Brendan Fraser. Part of that is down to his voice, which I think fits Bob just right. Side note, as long as I'm stealing from Reddit, Rick Dicker, played by Tommy Lee Jones, is absolute perfection. Seriously, what an underrated thread. Gladspell3306, you nailed these. Next, Elastigirl, otherwise known as Helen. I saw a concept trailer that posited Scarlett Johansson for the role, so obviously, she's got to be a contender. That Reddit thread suggested Jennifer Love Hewitt for the role. If you've seen her on 911, I think you'll agree that she would have what it takes. Then there's Bryce Dallas Howard. Some Redditor brought up her and her, assets, and frankly, they made a great point. In fact, screw it. Let's put Bryce Dallas Howard in the role. Back that thing up. What an awful joke. Violet Parr has a lot of great options, if only because there are quite a few teen girls in the acting game. McKenna Grace would need a dye job, but I feel like she could handle the role. Daphne Keane plays X, 23 in Logan and Deadpool and Wolverine, and between that superhero cred and her youthful appearance, she might be perfect for Violet. Mackenzie Foy also seems about right for the role. She looks a little old for it, but at 24 years old, she's still a high schooler in the eyes of Hollywood. I'm going to go with Daphne Keane on this one. No reason, I just thought she's neat. Then there's Dash. This one's tough because honestly, you'd want to cast a pretty young actor, meaning probably a relative unknown. Young Sheldon's Ian Armitage, for example, totally would have worked just a few years ago. I fear he's just too tall now. Walker Scoble faces a similar issue. A little younger, and he's a borderline doppelganger for Dash, but now that he's a full-blown teenager, it seems like he might have aged out of the role. Modern Family's Jeremy Maguire, however, could just work. So yeah, let's go with him. Congrats, Jeremy. You've been cast in this fake film by a total stranger on the internet. Not weird at all. Frozone is another toughie, if only because Samuel L. Jackson is so iconic in the role. Going back to that Reddit thread, Morris Chestnut would fit the super suit beautifully. My first thought, however, was Sterling K. Brown. I just love that guy, and he's got charisma for days. Brown's the Predator co-star, and the certified comedic genius Keegan-Michael Key would also probably rock the role. And actually, I'm gonna give it to Keegan-Michael Key. Dude's got the necessary comedic chops and the right build, so why not? Edna Mode is yet another challenge since she's the most cartoonish character. The only actor I can think of is, again from that Reddit thread, Linda Hunt. She bears a striking resemblance. And, for me, there's just no competition. Linda Hunt. Moving on, to make this work as a feature film, we have two options. Either we can shoot a totally original adventure for Pixar's superhero family to undertake, or we can remake the original in glorious live action. Now, I'm going to be a typical Disney suit about this and go with the latter, since we'll be putting The Incredibles through the usual slop grinder. We'll need to cast someone in the role of Syndrome. First up, Jason Lee. He'd have to be aged down a bit for the role, but when I hear Syndrome, the first person I think of is Brody from Mallrats. It also helps, of course, that he voiced the original character. Our next option comes from a different Reddit thread, which wisely posited Will Poulter for Syndrome. Great choice and easily beats out my original choice for the role, Damian Lewis. But let's see Lewis in the role anyway, because I like being placated. Thanks, AI artist man, you're a gem. And lastly, another one who's a bit old for the role, but could be aged down is Scott Farkas himself, Zach Ward. I know him best as the dead brother from Freddy vs. Jason, but whether you know him from Christmas Story or one of his many Uwe Boll film roles, He's a quality performer. Okay, maybe not in the Uwe Boll movies, but look, he's a ginger, all right? He's a ginger. I'm gonna go with Jason Lee. He's just got the voice and the vibe down. So let's slap some makeup on him and get him in the role. I also just feel like he ages like a fine wine. You know, if you're gonna have Syndrome, you gotta have Mirage. This Reddit thread, I keep mining gold from suggested Lady Gaga for the role. I'm kind of leaning towards Ruth Negga in a blonde wig, if I'm being honest. Ooh. But actually, if you're a fan of Severance or watched Dollhouse back in the day, you are definitely aware of Deechan Lockman. And yes, I did quadruple check how to say her name. Trist and model Deechan Lockman, who you will find. Okay, Deechan Lockman, I'm not stupid, and actually, honestly, she perfectly fits the role. So Deechan is Mirage. It is. Now then, back to plotting. I think it's reasonable to be averse to a straight remake, but I also know that Disney loves themselves some nostalgia, so it stands to reason that if this ever does happen, it won't be in the form of a sequel. What I personally like to see is an in-universe film that sets out to show the continuing adventures of the Incredibles. It'd be really cool to see the narrative license that could be taken with that approach, since it would be separated from the original continuity. It would also allow us to introduce new villains, bring back Syndrome despite his death in the original film, and even give us some wiggle room on the casting front. Would it come off as a propaganda piece about the titular family? Maybe, but I kind of enjoy the idea of going full Starship Troopers with this, essentially making a standard superhero epic with a family of heroes at its center, with the intent of showing them at their best and fictionalizing certain elements and events to get across the idea of a meta-narrative that presents them as invaluable to the human race. Or again, you could just remake the damn original movie. Whatever works. What do you think? Is a live-action Incredibles even plausible? I think so, but I'd love to read through your comments to see what I missed and how you'd cast this thing. Until next time, thanks for watching Movie Recap Pro.